It's really wonderful to be able to welcome all of you, but it's also a little scary. Because come Pesach, I know that you'll be back home. And who will be left with us? But we do have a large congregation, and actually a lot of young people who worship at different times in different places here in our building. But it's really a pleasure to have all of you. Myrna, did you give your son oratory lessons because you read the prayers so beautifully? I saw you smiling through the whole thing. Finally, the other comment outside of the introduction is, I don't know how many of you noticed, but as the Chazan was singing that beautiful Eitz Chaim, plaster fell from the ceiling during it, right? So what I was thinking about was that the Parsha, these Parshiot, which describe every single detail of the building of the Mishkan, in which synagogues copy some of those details so that we recall that and we have a plan that we've received and that we use and that we will pass on. But there's nothing about the ceiling. So this is what happens when men's left to his own devices. So we'll be auctioning off this plasters before. So with you Canadians, how many of you are from Montreal? So Anthony, you have attracted your landsmen here. Yeah, and how many from Toronto? Yeah, it's good. I hope you'll come back next week also. Right? So let me tell you about our guest this morning who's been here before and has spoken here before, and we obviously appreciate it, you, Anthony, which is why we've invited you back. MP Anthony Housefather has been a member of the Canadian House of Commons since 2015. He represents a House district in the West End of Montreal. Since 2019, Anthony has been a parliamentary secretary, which is essentially the House member that is second to a cabinet member in their department. He's currently parliamentary secretary to the president of the Treasury Board and previously served as parliamentary secretary to the Minister of Public Services and Procurement and as parliamentary secretary to the Minister of Labor. From 2016 to 2019, Anthony served as chair of House Justice and Human Rights Committee, and he continues to serve on that committee and the House Ethics Committee. He's vice chair of the Canada-U.S. Parliamentary Association and chair of the Canada-Israel Parliamentary Association. Before being elected to the House, Anthony served as executive vice president of corporate affairs and general counsel of a multinational tech company. He has also served as a city councilor and then mayor of his municipality. Anthony has also been a competitive swimmer most of his life. His performance in swimming earned him 7 medals in the 2013 Maccabi Games, 5 medals in the 2017 Maccabi Games. His participation in the Maccabi in his youth pushed him to become very active in Montreal Jewish community organizations. Anthony also chairs the Interparliamentary Task Force to combat online anti-Semitism, together with Congressman Debbie Wasserman Schultz. And he's the vice chair of the North American section of the International Conference of Jewish Parliamentarians, chaired by Senator Jackie Rosen. Anthony holds 2 law degrees from McGill University and a Master of Business Administration from Concordia University. It once again is both a pleasure and an honor to welcome MP Anthony Housefather.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. And Rabbi Steinhardt, thank you so much for inviting me here again. Now, being invited once, that's really nice, but being invited back for the sequel, that is really, really special. And I know I'm following in the footsteps of a couple of great speakers, Congressman Ted Deutsch, who chairs the American Jewish Committee, and Jonathan Greenblatt, who chairs the ADL. I work with both of them a lot, and obviously that's a hard act to follow, especially when you're talking about anti-Semitism, but I will do my best. The world has really changed since I was here a year ago. Today is the second anniversary of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. But how many of us are really thinking about that? How many of us are thinking about the South Carolina primary tonight? Since October the 7th, it's been really hard to focus on anything other than Israel and anti-Semitism. I think our communities have suffered two large collective traumas. The first, Hamas's invasion of Israel on the 7th of October. And the second, the incredible wave of anti-Semitism that has spread across the Western world, to our surprise, after Israel was attacked. And the world has really changed for me and for all of you, I think. I visited Israel as part of a congressional delegation in November, a month after the horrible attack, the pogrom, I would call it. And we went with the Speaker of the Knesset, wearing bulletproof vests and guarded by, each of us had an armed guard with them. And we visited Sderot and Kfar Aza and the kibbutzim in the south and smelled the smells of acrid smoke that still permeated where people were burned to death in their homes, like Vivian Silver, who was a peace activist from Winnipeg that spent her days driving people from Gaza to hospitals in Israel. I was at a kibbutz where there was a mayoralty election going on. Politicians, look out for that. And there were campaign posters for the mayor of that kibbutz. His body fell under one of his campaign posters. He was trying to defend his fellow residents from Hamas terrorists, and he was shot and killed right under his picture. And story after story did we hear from survivors and their families, people who were horrified that the security failure was so great. How could they cross the border like that? But more vividly, the stories of being in their safe rooms, and safe rooms that are planned for bombs and missiles, so there's no lock on the door of the safe room. As they spend 24 hours waiting for help to come, being on WhatsApp groups and watching family member and friend after family member and friend disappear from the WhatsApp chat. It was horrifying to attend a service in Israel for the 8 Canadians that were murdered by the Hamas terrorists that day, and to talk to their families. It's changed me, and I think it's changed all of you, but I was able to come back to Canada to explain to my fellow members of the House and the Senate why Israel felt the way it did, why they felt that Hamas needed to be destroyed, why they felt that if they didn't destroy Hamas militants, another pogrom would happen the next day that would kill other friends and family members. And it was a time that there was a lot more unity. I was able to get a resolution through the House unanimously condemning Hamas, supporting Israel, and calling for the hostages to be released. Today, that would be absolutely impossible. I was able to bring family members of hostages and had members from all parties come and talk to them and voice concern. Today, that wouldn't happen anymore. That support for Israel has plunged. We have also seen a surge in anti-Semitism domestically. I don't think that any of us ever thought that in Canada or the United States, we would revisit the days of the 1930s when mobs would march on the street calling for genocide against Israel and against Jews. How this has impacted us, of course, depends on our own place in society. But if you live in Dearborn, Michigan, or if you live in Toronto, and demonstrations are constantly passing your house, screaming, "Revolution, revolution, intifada, intifada," from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. These are very difficult moments for Jews. If you're on a college campus at Columbia, or Harvard, or Yale, or York, or McGill, or Concordia, this is a very difficult time for every young person in our community. If you've lost friends because they've seen social media posts where they've said hateful things about Jews or Israel, and most of our students have lost friends based on what's been written on social media that they never expected that people that were close to them would say, this has been incredibly traumatic. And for many of us, I consider myself a centrist, but I'm in a center-left party. Watching people who have always been our allies or who we've always allied with and supported, not supporting us back, has been very, very traumatic also. You're lucky here in South Florida to be represented by, in this district, Jared Moskowitz, in the next district, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, in the next district, Lois Frankel. You have three strong people who are pro-Israel, fight anti-Semitism. I'm very much aligned with them, but that's not the case everywhere. And I think I would pass on a message from all of us that we're not responsible if we have some colleagues that say things that are deeply offensive. It offends us as well. We can only control what we say. We can't control what President Biden or Prime Minister Trudeau says, and we can't control what some of our colleagues on the far left of our party say. They're a minority. They're not everyone. But what we've seen is there's a circle when it comes to anti-Semitism. It exists on the far right and on the far left, and they come together in conspiracy theories. And so I have a few messages that I wanted to convey. And the first is, please don't lose yourself in these fears about anti-Semitism. It can make you change how you think about things, but don't lose your soul. We all are Jews because we believe in tikkun olam, we believe in supporting others, we believe that everybody should have rights, we believe in a just and fair society. Don't turn your back on what you've always believed because of the trauma that you're suffering now. That's really important. The other thing is, don't let this issue define you. Yes, we're proud Jews, but we're also proud Americans and proud Canadians. And we care about other things beyond ourselves. We care about everyone. We live in two of the greatest countries in the world. And most people in our countries are on our side. This is not the 1930s when governments themselves were supporting anti-Semitism. This is not the 1930s where all of our neighbors have turned their back on us, and this is not the 1930s because we have Israel, a Jewish state that will fight for Jews everywhere in the world. So don't let you be defined by what's happening out there. The second thing is the arguments that I give my colleagues about anti-Semitism that I hope that you will all be able to impart when you're talking about this with people is that anti-Semitism is not only a threat to Jews. Anti-Semitism is a threat to our country, to our society. Anti-Semitism, which is the most pernicious, oldest form of hate, is based on one major assumption, which is that Jews control the world. There are a lot of tropes out there, but the one that Jews control the world is especially dangerous because it goes against our entire constitutional order. If you believe that Jews control the world no matter what you do, why bother voting? Why bother having fair and free elections? Why bother supporting the Constitution of our countries? And when people turn their back on the Constitution, when people turn their back on democracy because they believe that it doesn't matter anymore because the Jews all control us, and that's a trope from the right and from the left, it's an incredibly dangerous thing. And we need all of our fellow citizens of good faith to understand that. The second thing is that anti-Semitism is a national security issue. It is not only an issue for us domestically, it is an issue where our enemies, North Korea, Iran, Russia, I would say China too, but China in this case is less pervasive in the area of anti-Semitism, invade our social media with posts that they put up that you don't know are from there in a bid to create domestic strife in our own countries, where the rate of anti-Semitism in Canada and the United States is amongst the least in the world. You suddenly wonder, why is my Twitter feed, why is my TikTok feed, why is my Instagram feed, why is my Facebook feed full of this anti-Semitic garbage? A lot of it comes from abroad, hoping to ferment dissension and distrust and cynicism here in our countries. And all of us need to be aware of that and remind everyone how dangerous this is, because those promoting anti-Semitism have a different agenda than just promoting anti-Semitism. And that's really important to let everybody know. The third thing that I wanted to mention was, let's not just call everybody an anti-Semite because we don't agree with what they say. Anti-Semitism is really bad, and there are people out there. There are many people out there, way too many people out there who are anti-Semitic. But most people are not anti-Semitic. They may say something we don't like, and we need to educate them. We need to give them a chance. We can easily have these people that walk around saying our leaders are anti-Semitic, the principals of the universities are anti-Semitic. Most of these people, and I know them, whether it's police chiefs, university presidents, and certainly leaders of our government, are by no means anti-Semitic. They hate anti-Semitism as much as we do. They may not be the best at what they do, and they may be confused and not able to figure out what to do to stop the anti-Semitism on their campuses, in their cities, on their streets. But it's not their intention to promote it. And we have to be very careful as to where we accuse and where we don't accuse, because when we make an accusation of anti-Semitism, as I have a couple of times, it has to be valid, and you can't make the same argument 100 times about 100 different people. So that is something that I wanted to mention. There are three areas that I think are of the greatest concern to everybody. One is social media. And Debbie and I lead a task force of parliamentarians from across the world. There are Americans and Canadians on it, but there are people from Europe. Our last hearings were at the European Parliament in Brussels. There are people from South America. And our major battle right now is the word Zionism. I have to admit, this is a change for me and it's a change for Debbie. When Michal Kotler-Wunsch, who was an Israeli member of the Knesset, told us a few years ago that we need to have Zionists as a protected class on social media, not just Jews, we were very leery about that, because as we know, legitimate criticism of Israel is not anti-Semitic, even under the IRA definition that Canada has adopted. But over the last few months, I've seen all the people that used to write on social media hating me because I'm a Jew have been writing dirty Zionist instead of dirty Jew. They figured out how to get around the algorithms of the social media platforms by substituting the word Zionist for Jew. And when 95% of Jews are Zionists, because we believe that Israel should exist as a democratic Jewish state, well, then if you say that Zionism should be killed, genocide against Zionists, are you not really saying that against Jews? So we've met with X, we've met with Facebook, which is Meta, we've met with TikTok, and we've pushed that, and they all say, but no, when we have posts that say that you should kill all Israelis, we take them down. And I point to them, I brought them into a meeting, Debbie and I had a meeting with them, I pointed to them a video of a woman who was a professor fired from her job at a university in British Columbia because she glorified the Hamas terrorist attacks on October the 9th. And it was still up in 50 different places on TikTok. And so that is one of our biggest struggles for sure. The other one is policing, how to deal with these demonstrations and how to make sure that the demonstrations are not targeting Jewish community centers, Jewish schools, Jewish synagogues. We are not responsible for the actions of Israel. And we need our police and all of our law enforcement to understand where a demonstration crosses the line. It may be perfectly appropriate to demonstrate outside government buildings, outside the Israeli embassy, outside Israeli consulates, but not outside a synagogue. And the third is our universities, which has been my biggest challenge. I watched Congresswoman Stefanik's questions, and I was part of, this was not a partisan effort. There was a bipartisan group of legislators, both Democrat and Republican, that brought people to committee. And I saw the disastrous testimony of Harvard, MIT, and Penn. And so often I will copy my American colleagues. I brought a motion to our Justice Committee, which is our Judiciary Committee, to have a study on anti-Semitism focused on university anti-Semitism. So far, for some partisan reasons, my colleagues across the aisle have been holding it up, and I'm confident it'll pass this week. But what I'd like to do is, as opposed to focus on embarrassing university presidents that have done a bad job, I want to bring in the university presidents that have done a good job and ask them what they've done to stem anti-Semitism on their campus. How can other university presidents learn from them? I've spoken way too much over the last little while. I've become like the ombudsman in Canada for students at universities who are having a tough time. I've gone in and spoken at Hillels across the country. But now I'm getting emails from people in Saskatchewan, in Manitoba, in British Columbia, and Nova Scotia, asking me to speak to their university professors or university presidents. And so I took 5 members of the House, and we wrote to the biggest university presidents in Canada. And we asked them pointed questions about whether or not calling for the genocide against Jews was a violation of university codes of conduct. All of the 29 biggest universities in Canada answered that yes, it was. We got them on record. We got them on record on a number of things that they've all committed to do. But now they have to follow through. And I think that the one message I would convey, because this has become a big subject of debate, there's the argument about free speech and whether or not telling people on university campuses to uphold standards of decency is a violation of the First Amendment in the United States or the Second Amendment in Canada. And what I would say is freedom of speech guarantees you that you will not be criminally held responsible for things that you say. It doesn't mean that every workplace in the country and every university needs to tolerate conduct that would not be tolerated in normal, polite society. If you went to your company and you walked around screaming, "Death to Jews, death to Jews," I don't think you'd stay as an employee very long. And the same is true at college campuses. People should not have the inability to sit quietly and study in the library without having people yelling hateful things at them. They should be allowed to go to class without having people barricade the building and make them swear they're not Zionists before they walk in. And many of our universities are not upholding their own codes of conduct that they themselves have adopted. And this is where government has some role. I have moral suasion. I have the power of the pulpit. But university presidents need to lead. Donors need to lead. And this is where we can all pitch in, because I think the people who are at the greatest danger are our kids on campus. But I want to leave you with one thought again. Whether we're descended from Sephardic Jews that came here in colonial times, whether we're descended from German Jews that came here after the 1840s revolution, whether we're descended like most people here from Eastern European Jews that escaped pogroms between 1880 and 1910, or whether we're descendants of Holocaust survivors or came here from the former Soviet Union, we came to countries that were the Golden Medina, the places where we could be freer than anywhere else, where we rose to positions where we never held anywhere else, where we achieved economic influence that our ancestors only dreamed of. And we have every right to expect our countries to uphold that, and we have every right to stand proud and fight back when anti-Semitism rears its ugly heads on our shores. And I know that as communities we will do that. And I know, again, that this is not the 1930s, and all of our elected leaders, for the most part, stand with us, and so do the people. So long live the Jewish community. God bless America. God bless Canada. Thank you.